My name is Eleanor, I'm 66 years old. And my daughter-in-law expected me to cook Thanksgiving dinner for 25 people after treating me like a servant for 5 years. Before I tell you about how I orchestrated her downfall, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The old grandfather clock in the hall had just chimed 3 when she swept into my kitchen. My kitchen. The one I'd picked the tiles for myself 30 years ago. The one where I'd baked birthday cakes and kissed scraped knees. Now, it felt like an occupied territory. Jessica didn't knock, of course. She never did. She treated my home in the quiet suburbs of Atlanta like it was an extension of her own downtown apartment. Her heels, impossibly sharp and expensive, went click-clack on my ceramic floor. Each sound like a tiny hammer against my last nerve. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Paid for, no doubt, by my son Mark. "Eleanor," she chirped, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved just for me. She placed her designer handbag on my clean countertop. I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. I was wiping my hands on my apron, the familiar scent of yeast from the bread I was baking filling the air. It was a simple pleasure, one of the few I had left in my own house. "Jessica," I said, my voice even. "What a surprise. I have the most wonderful news," she announced, pulling out a chair from my kitchen table and sitting down, crossing her long legs. She looked at me, her smile wide, but it never ever reached her eyes. Those eyes were cold, calculating. "We are going to have the most amazing Thanksgiving this year. The whole family is coming." I just stood there waiting. I knew this tone. This was the prelude to a demand, gift-wrapped as a delightful opportunity. "It's going to be so festive," she continued, pulling out her phone and starting to scroll. "Uncle Robert is flying in from Denver. Sarah and her husband are driving up from Florida. All the cousins, everyone. It's only 25 people. Only." The word hung in the air between us, thick and heavy with 5 years of unspoken resentment. 25 people. In my house. To be fed and entertained and cleaned up after. By me. "I was thinking," she said, not looking up from her phone. "We'll do your classic roast turkey, of course. 2 of them to be safe. And that sweet potato casserole with the marshmallows, and the green bean casserole and your cranberry sauce from scratch. Oh, and for dessert, your pecan pie and a pumpkin cheesecake." She said we. But we both knew who we was. It was the same we who had hosted her book club last month, the same we who had catered Mark's promotion party, the same we who had cleaned up after every single holiday, birthday, and casual get-together for the last 5 years. We was me. Eleanor. The unpaid, unappreciated, live-in help. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet tectonic movement deep in my soul. A fault line that had been cracking under pressure for years finally gave way. I thought of the endless meals, the mountains of dishes, the casual dismissive way she would hand me her empty glass without a word of thanks. I thought of my son Mark standing by, his silence a form of permission. This was it. This was the last cut. Jessica finally looked up. A flicker of irritation on her face because I hadn't immediately agreed with joyous enthusiasm. "Well? Doesn't that sound perfect?" I took a slow breath. I let the silence stretch. I watched her perfectly manicured fingers tap impatiently on her phone. Then I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a small, sharp, dangerous thing. "Perfect," I said. Relief washed over her face. She thought she'd won. Again. "I'm going on vacation," I continued, my voice as calm and smooth as glass. "You and Mark can cook and clean. I'm not the help." The silence that followed was deafening. The ticking of the clock in the hall seemed to grow louder, each tick marking a second of her disbelief. Her perfectly glossed mouth fell open. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table. Her face, which was always a mask of smug satisfaction, was suddenly beautifully blank with shock. She stared at me as if I'd just started speaking in a foreign language. Her jaw quite literally dropped. What did you just say?" she finally stammered. Before I could answer, I heard the back door open. It was Mark, home early from work. He walked in, loosening his tie, a weary look on his face from his day at the law firm. He stopped short, sensing the electric tension in the room. He looked from Jessica's ghostly white face to my serene smile. "Mom? What's going on?" Jessica shot up from her chair, her voice a shrill shriek. Mark, your mother has lost her mind. She's trying to ruin Thanksgiving. I looked at my son, the boy whose face I knew better than my own. The man who had let his wife walk all over his mother for half a decade. I felt a pang of sorrow, but it was quickly consumed by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just doing this for me. In a way, I was doing this for him too. It was time for him to see. My gaze drifted past him, landing squarely on Jessica. My smile didn't waver. Ruin it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the air like a knife. Oh, sweetheart. I'm not trying to ruin it. I turned and began walking towards the hallway, my steps feeling lighter than they had in years. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their stunned silence behind me. I'm just getting out of the way before it ruins itself, I called over my shoulder, my hand resting on the newel post at the bottom of the stairs. And you have absolutely no idea what's about to hit you. It didn't happen overnight. This kind of disrespect, it's a slow poison. It starts with a single drop and you barely notice it. Then another. And another. Until one day you wake up and realize you're drowning in it. For me, it began 5 years ago, the day my son Mark brought Jessica home as his fiancée. I was happy for him, truly. My husband, David, had passed away 3 years prior, and the house felt so empty. Mark was all I had left, and seeing him happy was my only wish. Jessica was beautiful, charming, full of life. I wanted to love her. I opened my home and my heart to her completely. That was my first mistake. The first drop of poison was small. A few weeks after they were married, they were over for dinner. Jessica looked at the coffee I just brewed and said, "Oh, Eleanor, could you possibly make me a latte? I just can't do drip coffee." She said it with a laugh as if it were a cute little quirk. Mark just smiled lovingly at her. I didn't own a latte machine, so I spent 20 minutes heating milk on the stove and trying to froth it with a whisk, my hands aching. When I brought it to her, she took one sip and said, "It's a little weak," before pushing it aside. I felt a small, sharp sting, but I told myself I was being too sensitive. But the small stings kept coming. It was the way she'd leave her plate on the table, expecting me to clear it. It was the way she'd borrow my nice serving dishes for her own parties and return them weeks later, unwashed. It was the constant, casual assumption that my time had no value. I was retired, so of course I was available. Of course I could babysit her friend's dog. Of course I could wait all afternoon for the cable guy at their apartment. Mark saw it. I know he did. But he's a man who hates conflict more than anything in the world. Whenever I'd try to bring it up gently, he'd get this pained look on his face. "Come on, Mom," he'd say. "That's just how she is. Let's just keep the peace." Keep the peace. For 5 years I kept the peace. And in return I lost pieces of myself. The incident with the necklace was the first time I realized this wasn't just thoughtlessness. It was malice. David had given me a simple gold locket for our 25th anniversary. It wasn't fancy, but it held tiny pictures of him and a baby Mark. I never took it off. One Friday, Jessica was getting ready for a fancy work dinner at my house. She came into my room while I was getting dressed and gushed about how beautiful the locket was. "Can I please just try it on?" she begged. "It would be perfect with this dress." Like a fool, I let her. She promised she'd give it right back. In the chaos of getting her and Mark out the door, I forgot about it. The next morning, I realized it was gone. I called her in a panic. "The locket? Oh my gosh, Eleanor, I gave it back to you before we left. Don't you remember?" Her voice was so convincing, so full of concern. I was frantic. I searched the house from top to bottom. I looked in every drawer, under every cushion. I felt like a part of my husband was missing. Mark helped me look, sighing with frustration, making me feel like I was a forgetful old woman. 2 weeks went by. I was heartbroken. I had resigned myself to the fact that it was lost forever. Then one afternoon, I was putting away some clean laundry for Mark and Jessica in their bedroom. On her dresser, half hidden under a silk scarf, was my locket. My blood ran cold. It was like a scene from a movie. I picked it up, the familiar weight of it cool in my palm. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't lost. It was stolen. I confronted her that evening, my voice shaking. I held it out in my hand. "I found this in your jewelry box, Jessica." She had the audacity to look surprised, then to laugh. A light tinkling laugh. Oh my goodness, there it is. I was wondering where it went. I must have taken it off that night and forgotten all about it. Silly me. She reached for it, but I pulled my hand back. You told me you gave it back to me, I said, my voice low. She just shrugged, her smile never faltering. Did I? Oh, Eleanor, you know how hectic things get. I must have been confused. She looked at Mark, who was standing in the doorway. Your mom is making such a big deal out of nothing, honey. Mark looked at the necklace in my hand, then at his wife's perfectly composed face, and then back at me. I saw the conflict in his eyes. I saw him choose the easier path. Mom, he said, his voice pleading. It was just a misunderstanding. You got it back. Let's just drop it. I dropped it. I put the locket back around my neck and walked away. But I didn't just drop the argument. I dropped the hope that my son would ever stand up for me. I dropped the illusion that my daughter-in-law was anything other than a cruel, calculating thief. That was the day I stopped keeping the peace and started planning for war. After David passed, my garden became my sanctuary. Specifically, my rose garden. He had planted the first bush for me on our first anniversary. A beautiful Mr. Lincoln with deep red, velvety petals. Over the years we'd added more, and now I had 24 different varieties. They were my pride and joy. Tending to them, the pruning, the feeding, the careful watch for black spot was my therapy. It was how I still connected with him. I was part of the Atlanta Horticultural Society, a lovely group of mostly women my age. We took turns hosting meetings at our homes, showing off our gardens. This year it was my turn to host the October meeting. I had been working for months to get my roses in perfect condition for the showing. They were magnificent. The Queen Elizabeths were covered in pink blooms, and the peace roses were the size of my fist. A week before the meeting, Jessica came over. She saw me out in the garden and came strolling across the lawn. Eleanor, this all looks so lovely, she said, though I could tell she was bored. You must be working so hard. Let me help you with something. It's the least I can do. I was hesitant. Jessica had never shown an ounce of interest in gardening before. Oh, that's all right, dear. I'm just about finished. No, I insist, she said, her smile bright and insistent. What about feeding them? You're always talking about fertilizer. I can do that. Before I could protest further, she'd spotted the large pressure sprayer I used for my special fish emulsion fertilizer. I'll use this. It'll be so much faster. Something in my gut screamed no, but Mark was there, and he gave me that look that just let her help Mom look. So I explained carefully which container held the fertilizer, and how to mix it with water. I watched her for a few minutes and she seemed to be doing it correctly. I had to go inside to take a phone call, and when I came back out she was finishing up, wiping her hands on a towel. All done, she announced proudly. They're going to be spectacular for your little garden party. 2 days later, I noticed the leaves on my Mr. Lincoln were starting to yellow and curl at the edges. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. By the next morning it had spread. My beautiful, prize-winning roses were dying. The leaves were turning brown and brittle, the magnificent blooms drooping and shriveling on the stems. It looked like they'd been scorched by a chemical fire. I walked in a daze to the garden shed. The sprayer was there, rinsed clean. But behind it, tucked away in the corner behind a bag of potting soil, was an almost empty gallon jug of industrial-strength weed and grass killer. The kind that kills everything down to the root. It felt like a punch to the gut. This was no accident. You couldn't mistake a brightly colored jug of poison with a skull and crossbones on it for a bottle of organic fish emulsion. It was impossible. She had done this on purpose. When Mark and Jessica came over for dinner that night, I couldn't even look at her. Mark saw the dead roses and was shocked. Mom, what happened? I looked straight at Jessica. I think your wife knows, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Jessica's eyes filled with tears instantly. It was an incredible performance. Oh, Eleanor. Oh my God. Was it the fertilizer? Did I mix it wrong? Oh, I feel so terrible. She buried her face in Mark's chest, sobbing. You used the weed killer, Jessica, I stated flatly. The what? She looked up, her face a perfect mask of confusion and horror. No, I would never. The bottle was right where you said it would be. It must have been in the wrong bottle. Maybe there was a mix-up at the store. Mark, of course, rushed to her defense. "Mom, it was an accident. A horrible accident, but you can't blame her. She was just trying to help." I just stared at my dead roses, the legacy of my husband destroyed. And I looked at my son, defending the woman who had done it. The garden club meeting was a complete humiliation. I had to explain that a terrible accident had destroyed my garden. I saw the pity in my friend's eyes. That was the day I realized I wasn't just being disrespected. I was being actively, maliciously erased from my own life. First my memories, then my joy. But the real proof of her plot, the cold, hard evidence of her scheme, was even more horrifying. And I was about to find it in a place I never would have looked. The turning point, the moment everything crystallized from suspicion into cold, hard fact, came about 3 months after the Rose Garden incident. Mark, bless his conflict-averse heart, was in a panic over his taxes. He was a partner at his law firm now, and his finances were more complicated. He called me flustered. "Mom, I'm so behind. Jessica was supposed to have organized all the receipts for the accountant, but she can't find half of them. Could you possibly help me out? You've always been so good with this stuff." It was a familiar refrain. Eleanor the organizer. Eleanor the fixer. Normally I would have sighed and agreed. This time I saw an opportunity. "Of course, dear. Do you want me to come over to your apartment?" "Actually," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "That's the thing. Everything is digital now. I can just give you shared access to our cloud storage folder. All the bank statements, pay stubs, everything is in there. Or it's supposed to be." He gave me the login information. That evening, after a quiet dinner, I sat down at my desk with a cup of tea and logged into their shared drive. It was a mess, just as I expected. Scans of documents were scattered everywhere with random file names. I started the tedious process of sorting, creating folders for income, expenses, investments. As I was dragging a file for a mortgage statement, my mouse slipped. The file landed in a different folder, one I hadn't noticed before. It was innocuously named Dream Project. My first thought was that it was something for their apartment, maybe a renovation plan. Curiosity got the better of me. Clicked it open. The folder wasn't full of paint swatches or furniture ideas. It was full of financial documents. Dozens of them. But they weren't the same as the ones in the main tax folder. I opened the first one. It was a credit card statement. It was a card I had never seen before. A high-end American Express Platinum. It was in Mark's name. I felt a prickle of unease. I opened another. And another. Visa signature. MasterCard Black. All in Mark's name. I started opening the statements themselves. The charges were staggering. A $5,000 handbag from Chanel. A $7,000 shopping spree at Saks Fifth Avenue. First-class flights to Napa Valley for a girls' weekend. A $10,000 charge at a luxury spa resort. My hands started to shake. I cross-referenced the card numbers with the official statements Mark had in his tax folder. None of them matched. These were secret accounts. Secret cards that my son knew nothing about. I started adding up the balances. 10,000 here. 25,000 there. 15,000 on another. By the time I was done, my tea was cold and my heart was hammering against my ribs. It was over $70,000. $70,000 in secret debt. Where was the money coming from? Mark had a good salary, but not that good. They were saving for a bigger place, he told me. Then I found another subfolder, labeled Income. Inside was a single document, a photoshopped pay stub. It was from the boutique where Jessica worked part-time, but the numbers were all wrong. It showed her earning a monthly salary nearly 4 times what I knew she actually made. She had been lying to Mark about her income for years, creating the illusion that she was contributing significantly to their finances, all while sinking them into a black hole of debt. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. The room was silent except for the frantic beating of my own heart. This wasn't just irresponsible spending. This was a calculated, long-term deception. A web of lies so intricate it took my breath away. I thought about Mark working 60-hour weeks, believing he was building a future with his wife, while she was secretly bankrupting them behind his back. I felt a surge of fury so intense it made me dizzy. This was more than just disrespect. This was a betrayal of the deepest kind. I took a shaky breath, my finger hovering over the mouse. There were more files in the Dream Project folder. I had to know how deep the rabbit hole went. I had to see it all. With a trembling hand, I navigated deeper into the Dream Project folder. I found a folder simply labeled Emails. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. This felt wrong, like a violation of privacy. But the $70,000 in secret debt had shattered any notion of privacy. This was now a rescue mission. I had to know what my son was facing. Clicked it open. It was a series of saved email chains, mostly between Jessica and her older sister Sarah. The subject line of the first one I opened made my stomach clench. The Atlanta House Project. I opened it. My eyes scanned the words, but my brain struggled to process them. Jess, are you sure about this? Sarah had written. Mark loves that house. And Eleanor's still in perfect health. Jessica's reply was underneath. Don't be so dramatic, Sar. She's 66. It's not like she's going to live forever. And Mark does what I tell him to do eventually. The key is to plant the seed now. Keep talking about how much work the upkeep is, how lonely she must be. I've already got a real estate agent friend to draw up a quiet valuation. The market is hot. We could clear over $1 million after taxes. I felt the air leave my lungs. $1 million. My home. The home I had shared with my husband for 30 years, the place where I had raised my only child, was being discussed like a stock to be sold off for profit. She was actively planning to manipulate my son into selling our family home the moment I was gone. But it got worse. Attached to the email was a PDF. It was a forged property appraisal. It valued my house at nearly $200,000, less than its actual market value. The text of the email explained the disgusting logic. Jessica planned to convince Mark that they should buy the house from the estate after my death, using the low appraisal to justify a smaller payout to any other potential beneficiaries of my will, ensuring they got the property for a steal. She was planning to swindle her own husband out of his full inheritance. I had to stop reading. My vision was blurring. I pushed my chair back from the desk and put my head in my hands. If you've ever felt the ground crumble beneath your feet, if you've ever had the person you tried to love and welcome into your family reveal themselves as a monster, you know the feeling. It's a cold, hollowing dread that settles deep in your bones. I needed a moment to breathe, to stop my world from spinning off its axis. But I knew I couldn't stop. I had to see the whole ugly truth. I forced myself to look back at the screen. I opened another email chain. This one was with her uncle Robert, the wealthy one from Denver. It was dated just a few weeks ago. Uncle Robert, she wrote, her tone syrupy and sweet. Mark and I are looking to make a major investment to expand his business interests, but capital is a little tight right now after putting a down payment on a new property. We were wondering if you might be able to help with a short-term family loan. Of course, we are good for it. Eleanor's health has been a bit delicate lately, and she's made it very clear that Mark is her sole heir. Her estate, including the Atlanta house, is quite substantial, so repayment is absolutely guaranteed. I was floored. My health was delicate? I had lower blood pressure than my son, and she was using my eventual death, my legacy, my life's work, as collateral to secure a loan from her relatives to pay for her secret shopping addiction. She wasn't just a liar and a thief. She was a ghoul waiting for me to die so she could cash in. Every puzzle piece clicked into place. The faked concern, the constant talk about money, the desire for a huge, impressive Thanksgiving gathering. It was all a performance. A show for her wealthy relatives, to paint a picture of a successful, loving family on the cusp of a major business expansion, all to squeeze more money out of them. And I was the centerpiece of the illusion, the doting wealthy matriarch who would soon be leaving them a fortune. My role was to cook, clean, and then conveniently die. A strange calm washed over me. The shock and the hurt receded, replaced by something cold and hard as steel. The grief was gone. In its place, a quiet, calculated rage began to burn. She had mistaken my kindness for weakness. She had mistaken my silence for submission. She thought she was playing chess with a pawn. She was about to find out she was playing with a queen. And the queen was done playing defense. The next morning I didn't cry. I didn't storm over to Mark's apartment. I didn't make a single hysterical phone call. Instead, I got up, made my coffee, and sat down at my desk with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of trying to keep the peace had lifted, and the path forward was brutally clear. My first call wasn't to my son. It was to Robert Miller, the lawyer who had handled my husband's estate. He had been a friend of David's for decades, a sharp, no-nonsense man I trusted implicitly. "Robert, it's Eleanor," I said when his secretary put me through. "I need to see you. Today if possible. It's urgent." His voice was warm but immediately sensed the gravity in mine. "Of course, Eleanor. Come by at 11. Before I left for his office, I methodically went back into the cloud drive. I downloaded every single file from the Dream Project folder. Every secret credit card statement, every deceitful email, every forged document. I saved them to a secure, password-protected flash drive, which I then put into my purse. Then I went back and permanently deleted the Dream Project folder from their cloud. It was a small, petty act, but it felt good to wipe away her secret digital world. Let her wonder where it went. At Robert Miller's office, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I sat down across from his large mahogany desk, took out the flash drive and said, "Robert, I need you to look at this. And I need to know my options." For the next hour, he sat in silence, his expression growing grimmer with each document he opened. He read the emails between Jessica and her sister. He saw the fake appraisal. He saw the $70,000 in debt. When he finally looked up at me, the friendly warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by a lawyer's cold fury. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low, "this is more than just bad behavior. Some of this, especially using Mark's information to open credit accounts without his knowledge, borders on criminal fraud." "I know," I said calmly, "but I don't want to send her to jail. Not yet. I want her to be exposed. I want her to face the consequences of her own actions. I want my son to see who he married. And I want to make damn sure she can never touch a single thing I own, now or after I'm gone." A slow smile spread across Robert's face. "I like the way you think, Eleanor. We can absolutely do that." We spent the next 2 hours mapping out the strategy. The first step was to protect my assets. Robert began drawing up the paperwork to place my house and a significant portion of my savings into an irrevocable family trust. It would ensure that Mark would be taken care of, but the assets could never be sold or used as collateral by Jessica. My will would be amended immediately. The word inheritance would be redefined on my terms. The second step was the investigation. "We have what she wrote," Robert said, tapping the screen. "But it would be good to have more. Something undeniable." He gave me the number of a private investigator, a discreet man named Mr. Hayes. "He's the best in Atlanta. He can find out anything." I called Mr. Hayes from the car on my way home. I explained the situation, my voice steady and clear. I told him I wanted to know everything about Jessica's finances, her real income, and any other secrets she was hiding. He was professional and to the point. He would get started immediately. That afternoon I went to my bank. Not the one I'd used for 40 years, the one Mark and Jessica knew about. I went to a different one across town. I opened a new set of accounts and began the process of transferring the majority of my liquid assets. It was a quiet, deliberate act of cutting the financial cords. I came home that evening as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my lawn. The house was quiet. For the first time it didn't feel empty. It felt like a fortress. My fortress. The war room was set up. The generals were in place. Jessica thought she was planning a Thanksgiving dinner. She had no idea she was the guest of honor at her own execution. And I was the one sending out the invitations. The most crucial part of my plan wasn't legal or financial. It was psychological. I knew that if I confronted Jessica directly, she would twist it. She would cry, lie, and paint me as a jealous, interfering mother-in-law. Mark, caught in the middle, would likely fall for it. No, I couldn't be the one to lower the boom. The executioner had to be someone she would never expect. Her own family. I waited a week, letting Mr. Hayes do his work. He was fast. He confirmed everything I had found and then some. Jessica wasn't just lying about her salary. She had been fired from a previous job for petty theft, a detail she'd conveniently left off her resume. It was another piece of ammunition I tucked away. Now it was time. I sat down and composed an email. It was a work of art, if I do say so myself. I sent it to 2 people, her sister Sarah and her uncle Robert. The subject line was simple. A little worried about Jessica and Mark. I started the email with warmth and affection. I wrote about how happy I was to be hosting everyone for Thanksgiving, how much I was looking forward to seeing them. Then I carefully transitioned the tone. I'm writing to you both in confidence, I typed, because you're the two people Jessica respects most in the world, and I find myself in a delicate situation. I'm a bit worried about the kids. They seem to be under a lot of financial stress lately. Jessica has mentioned a few times how expensive things are, and I've been trying to help out where I can, but I get the sense there's more going on than they're letting on. Mark works so hard, and I'm afraid they might have overextended themselves. I let that hang there for a paragraph. The worried, loving mother-in-law. I only want what's best for them, I continued. I was helping Mark sort some of his tax documents the other day to try and find some savings for them, and I came across a few statements that confused me. I'm not sure if I'm reading them correctly. I'm a bit old-fashioned when it comes to these things. This was the masterstroke. I've attached a couple of them here. Perhaps you, with your financial expertise, could take a look and tell me if this is normal for a young couple? I hate to bother you, but I would sleep so much better knowing they're on solid ground before they make any big business investments. I attached 2 documents. Not the whole trove. Just 2. The first was the secret American Express statement showing the Chanel handbag and the Napa trip. The second was the photoshopped pay stub showing her inflated income. It was more than enough. I hit send. I didn't have to wait long. The reply from Sarah came in less than 10 minutes. It was one word, unbelievable, followed by, calling you in 5. Her call was a flurry of hushed, furious questions. I played my part perfectly, the confused and concerned older woman. Oh dear, is it that bad? I was so hoping I was mistaken. Mistaken. Sarah practically spat the word. Eleanor, that Amex card isn't their joint account. I know for a fact Mark doesn't have a platinum card. And that pay stub is a joke. She hasn't earned that much in the last 6 months combined. Where is this money coming from? Uncle Robert's email arrived while I was still on the phone with Sarah. His was more blunt. Eleanor, thank you for bringing this to my attention. This is deeply concerning. Do not, under any circumstances, mention this to Jessica. I will handle this personally. We will see you at Thanksgiving. He was going to handle it. It was more perfect than I could have imagined. They were angry. They felt deceived. And they were coming into my house for a holiday. A house where Jessica was expecting to be the star of a show funded by my labor and her lies. The bait was set. The trap was laid. The hunters were on their way. Now, all I had to do was get out of the cage and watch from a safe distance as the tiger they thought they knew turned on its own trainer. The morning after my confrontation with Jessica and Mark in the kitchen was cold and gray, a perfect reflection of the atmosphere inside my house. They were tiptoeing around me, speaking in hushed whispers. Jessica tried to apologize, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. Eleanor, I am so sorry about the misunderstanding. Of course we'll help with Thanksgiving. We can all do it together. Mark just looked miserable, caught between the 2 most important women in his life. I just smiled serenely. Don't you worry about a thing, dear. I've got it all under control. They thought I had caved. They thought my little rebellion was over. They were so wrong. I woke up at 5 a.m. the next day, a full 2 days before the guests were scheduled to arrive. The house was dark and silent. I moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. First, the kitchen. I systematically emptied the refrigerator and the pantry. Every bottle of wine, every can of soup, every stick of butter. I packed it all into coolers and boxes. The 22-pound turkey I had bought came with me. Next, I went to the dining room. My grandmother's silverware, the good china David and I had received for our wedding, the crystal wine glasses, all of it was carefully wrapped in old towels and packed away. I took them down to the old storage locker in the basement, a place they wouldn't even think to look, and secured it with a brand new padlock. The elegant tablecloths and linen napkins? They went into my suitcase. I called the cleaning service I'd used for years, the one I paid for but Jessica always claimed credit for. I canceled my weekly service indefinitely. My final act was to write a note. It was short and not so sweet. I placed it on the bare kitchen table. Mark and Jessica decided to leave for my vacation a little early to beat the traffic. The house is all yours. Have a wonderful and perfect Thanksgiving. Love, Mom. At 6:30 a.m., a pre-booked taxi pulled silently into my driveway. The driver helped me load my coolers and suitcases into the trunk. As we pulled away, I took one last look at my house. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was a stage. And the first act of a tragedy was about to begin. I hadn't lied about going on vacation. I had just lied about the destination. I wasn't heading for a rustic cabin in the mountains. My driver was taking me 3 hours east, to Charleston, South Carolina. I had booked myself a suite for a week at the Dewberry, a 5-star hotel that overlooked Marion Square. When I checked in, the concierge treated me like royalty. My suite was bigger than their first apartment. It had a king-sized bed with 100 pillows, a deep soaking tub, and a balcony with a stunning view of the historic city. The first thing I did was call room service. "Yes, I'd like to order a bottle of your best champagne," I said, sinking into a plush armchair. "And a lobster roll. And a slice of your chocolate silk cake." I had spent 5 years serving them. Now I was going to be served. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the balcony, wrapped in a fluffy hotel robe, the salty air on my face. My phone was silent. For now. But I knew the storm was coming. Back in Atlanta, my son and his wife were probably still sleeping soundly, completely unaware that they were about to wake up in an empty house, with an empty fridge, just 48 hours before 25 hungry relatives descended upon them. I took a long, slow sip of champagne. Tasted like freedom. Tasted like victory. And the best part was the show hadn't even started yet. For the first 24 hours there was silence. I spent the day exploring Charleston, walking through the historic market, enjoying a quiet lunch in a hidden courtyard. I didn't check my phone once. I left it in the hotel's safe. This was my time. The silence was broken at 10:15 the next morning. I had just returned from a walk on the beach when I retrieved my phone. 17 missed calls. All from Mark. And a flood of text messages. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down to watch the symphony unfold. The first text was from 9:30 a.m. "Mom, where are you? We just saw your note. You left early?" The next 10 minutes later. "Seriously, Mom, call me. The fridge is completely empty. Did we get robbed?" I chuckled at that one. Then at 10:05 a.m. "Jessica is freaking out. She just realized all the good china is gone. And the silverware. What is going on?" Then the panic really started to set in. The texts started coming every 2 minutes. "Mom, this isn't funny. Uncle Robert and the first wave of guests will be here tomorrow morning. Where is the turkey? You bought a turkey, right? Jessica is crying. She says you did this on purpose. Please call me. I don't know what to do." The phone started ringing again. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a new message popped up. I listened. His voice was tight with stress. "Mom, please pick up the phone. I am standing in an empty pantry. There is literally nothing here but a box of old crackers. 25 people are coming." 25. What were you thinking? What are we supposed to feed them? Jessica is having a full-blown panic attack. You have to fix this. I deleted the message. Then came the calls from Jessica. I didn't even bother listening to the voicemails. I could imagine the shrieking, the accusations, the fake tears. For 5 years my phone rang because they needed something from me. A recipe, a ride, my time, my energy, my money. For the first time it was ringing because they didn't have me. And I have to admit, the feeling was deliciously sweet. I put the phone on silent, face down on the table. I had a spa appointment at 2 o'clock. The chaos could wait. Later that afternoon, while a woman named Darlene was giving me the best pedicure of my life, I glanced at my phone. A text from an unknown number. "Eleanor, this is Sarah, Jessica's sister. We are driving up now and we'll be there in the morning. Jess just called me and she was incoherent. Is everything all right? She said you left and took all the food?" I smiled at Darlene and picked out a lovely shade of coral for my toes. I typed back a simple reply. "Hi Sarah, so lovely to hear from you. Yes, I had to leave for my trip a bit early. I'm sure Jessica has everything wonderfully under control. She's such a fantastic hostess. Can't wait to hear all about the wonderful dinner." I hit send. Then I turned my phone off completely. Let them talk to each other. Let the web of lies begin to unravel on its own. That night I ordered dinner in again. A perfectly cooked filet mignon. As I ate, I imagined the scene back in Atlanta. Mark and Jessica, probably in the middle of a massive fight. A desperate last-minute trip to a crowded grocery store the day before a major holiday. The dawning terrifying realization that they had no idea how to cook for a crowd, no idea how to host, no idea how to do any of the work I had made look so effortless for years. It was better than any movie. Stay tuned because the best part, the arrival of the guests, was yet to come. The morning the guests were scheduled to arrive dawned bright and clear in Charleston. I, on the other hand, woke up to a digital hurricane. I had made the mistake of turning my phone back on before I went to sleep. It was a cacophony of desperation. I decided to listen to the voicemails while I enjoyed my room service breakfast of Eggs Benedict. It was a true masterclass in panic. The first was from Mark, left at 6:30 a.m. His voice was cracking. "Mom, I'm at the grocery store. It's a madhouse. They're out of half the things on Jessica's list. What kind of sage do you use for the stuffing? Does it matter? And how many pounds of potatoes do I need for 25 people? Please just text me back. I'm begging you." The second was from Jessica, left around 7 a.m. She was audibly sobbing. "Eleanor, I know you're angry. I get it. I messed up. But please don't do this to me. Don't humiliate me in front of my family. My Uncle Robert thinks I'm this competent, successful person. What am I going to tell him when he arrives to an empty house? I promise I will make it up to you. We can go to therapy, whatever you want. Just please tell me where you put the good tablecloths." The third message, from Mark again at 7:45 a.m., was the best one yet. "Mom, they're here. Uncle Robert and Sarah's family just pulled up. 15 minutes early. We don't even have coffee to offer them." Jessica locked herself in the bathroom. "I don't know what to say to them. You have to call me. You have to tell me what to do." Music to my ears. But the message I was truly waiting for had arrived via text. It was from Uncle Robert, sent at 8:05 a.m. "Eleanor, we have arrived. The situation here is confusing. Mark seems overwhelmed and Jessica is nowhere to be seen. I was very much looking forward to meeting you. Mark said you went on vacation. I hope everything is all right." The trap was sprung. The guests had arrived not to a warm, festive home, but to a scene of domestic chaos. I let them stew for another hour. Finally, at 9 a.m. I called Mark. He answered on the first ring. "Mom. Oh my God, Mom." His voice was a desperate whisper. "Where are you?" "Good morning, dear," I said, my voice cheerful and relaxed. "I'm just enjoying a lovely morning on my balcony. How is everything there?" "How is everything?" he hissed. "It's a disaster. Uncle Robert is sitting in our living room asking where the hostess is. Sarah's trying to figure out how to work the coffee maker. There is no food. Jessica won't come out of the bathroom. You have to come home." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mark. My vacation has just started." "This isn't a vacation, it's an ambush," he sputtered. "How could you do this to us? To the family?" "Let me be very clear, son," I said, my cheerful tone evaporating, replaced by ice. "For 5 years, you and your wife have been the family. I have been the staff. The staff has retired. You are now the management. So manage." I could hear voices in the background. A deep, authoritative voice. It had to be Uncle Robert. "Mark, who are you talking to? Is that your mother? Let me speak with her." "Mom," Mark pleaded, his voice breaking. "Uncle Robert wants to talk to you. Please just explain that there's been a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Mark. There is only the truth. And it seems the truth has finally decided to pay you a visit. Put him on the phone." There was a pause, some muffled words, and then a new voice came on the line. It was smooth, deep, and held an undercurrent of irritation. "Mrs. Eleanor? This is Robert, Jessica's uncle. I believe you and I need to have a conversation." "Robert," I said warmly, "it's a pleasure to finally speak with you. I've heard so much about you." "Likewise," he said, though his tone was clipped. "Perhaps you can explain to me what in God's name is going on here. My niece promised us a beautiful family Thanksgiving, and I've walked into what appears to be a hostage situation." I took a sip of my coffee. "Well, Robert," I began, "the hostage, it seems, has finally been set free." "What is that supposed to mean?" Robert asked, his voice sharp with impatience. "It means," I said, choosing my words carefully. That the person who has planned, cooked, and cleaned for every single one of your family gatherings for the past 5 years has finally taken a day off. And it seems no one else knows how to run the show. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could picture him standing in my living room, taking in the scene, the lack of decorations, the smell of burnt coffee Mark was probably trying to make, the palpable tension. Are you telling me, he said slowly, that you were the one doing everything all along? Jessica told us. She said she was the one who managed all these events. Did she? I replied, letting a note of weary sadness enter my voice. Jessica has a wonderful imagination. Robert, I love my son, and I have tried to love his wife. But I am tired. I am a 66-year-old widow, and I am done being treated like an unpaid caterer in my own home. Jessica invited 25 people to my house for a major holiday, without so much as asking me. She simply presented me with a list of demands. I decided to decline. Another long pause. I could hear muffled arguing in the background. It sounded like Sarah's voice. I see, Robert finally said, and his tone had changed completely. The irritation was gone, replaced by a cold understanding. Eleanor, my sister and I received an email from you last week about your financial concerns. Yes, I said quietly. I was worried. We are past worried, he said, his voice dropping. We did some digging of our own. The situation is far worse than you know. Thank you for opening our eyes. I believe we, as a family, have some matters to discuss with my niece. You enjoy your vacation. You've more than earned it. He hung up. I spent the rest of the day in blissful peace. I knew the storm was raging in Atlanta, but it was their storm, not mine. That evening, I got a call from Sarah. Her voice was exhausted but resolute. Eleanor, she said, I owe you an apology. On behalf of my entire family, we have been lied to for years. What happened? I asked. She gave a short, bitter laugh. What didn't happen? Thanksgiving dinner was Domino's pizza. We ate it off paper towels because Mark couldn't figure out where you'd hidden the plates. The entire day wasn't a celebration. It was a family intervention. She told me everything. They had confronted Jessica with the credit card statements. At first, Jessica had denied it. Then she tried to blame it on Mark. But Sarah, who worked in finance, had come prepared. She had pulled a credit report. It's bad, Eleanor, Sarah said, her voice low. She didn't just have secret credit cards. It looks like she used Mark's social security number to open a few of them without his consent. That's identity theft. It's a felony. My blood ran cold. I had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed was another thing entirely. Mark is devastated, Sarah continued. He's in complete shock. He had no idea. He just kept saying, she wouldn't do that. Well, she did. We also confronted her about the lies she told Robert, about your health and the inheritance. She just crumbled. She couldn't lie her way out of it when we had the proof right there. So what happens now? I asked. Well, Sarah said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. Uncle Robert has told her she has 1 week to come up with a full accounting of every dollar she owes and a payment plan. All family loans are being called in. The financial support she was hoping for is gone. And she has to come clean to Mark about the identity theft, or Robert will report it himself. He's talking about forcing a post-nuptial agreement, or even encouraging Mark to consider a divorce. Poetic justice. It was more than I had ever hoped for. Eleanor, Sarah said, her voice softening. Robert told me what you said, about being the hostage who was set free. You are a woman of incredible strength and dignity. We are so sorry for our part in this. We should have seen it sooner. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost brought me to tears. Thank you, Sarah. That means more than you know. You deserve to be treated with respect, she said firmly. We're going to make sure Jessica understands that now. I hung up the phone and looked out at the dark ocean. The storm in Atlanta had broken. And tomorrow, I was going home to survey the wreckage. I checked out of the hotel on Thanksgiving morning. The drive back to Atlanta was quiet. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel triumphant. I just felt calm. For the first time in years, I was in control of my own life, my own home. When I pulled into my driveway, the scene was grim. Several cars I didn't recognize were still there. Uncle Robert's rental, Sarah's minivan. I walked up to my own front door and used my key. The house was silent. As I stepped into the foyer, they appeared at the entrance to the living room. Mark, his face pale and haggard, looking 10 years older. Jessica, her eyes red and swollen, her beautiful clothes rumpled. She wouldn't look at me. And behind them, Uncle Robert and Sarah, their expressions stern and somber. "Eleanor," Robert said, stepping forward. "Welcome home." "Thank you, Robert," I said, my voice steady. "It seems you've had a busy few days." Just then the doorbell rang. Everyone started. I just smiled. "I'll get it. I'm expecting someone." I opened the door to find Robert Miller, my lawyer, standing on the porch, a leather briefcase in his hand. "Robert, thank you for coming on a holiday," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "For this, Eleanor, I'd cancel Christmas," he murmured, stepping inside. Jessica's head snapped up when she saw him. A flicker of real fear finally entered her eyes. "A lawyer? Why is there a lawyer here?" I closed the front door and turned to face them all. Because after 5 years of deception and disrespect, I've decided it's time to set some new house rules. Legally binding ones. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every person in that room was hanging on my every word. Mr. Miller opened his briefcase on the hall table. "Very well," he said in his professional drone. "Let's begin. First, regarding the ownership of this property. Mrs. Eleanor has established an irrevocable trust. This house and the property it sits on is now owned by the trust. Upon her passing, her son, Mark, will be the lifetime beneficiary, meaning he can live here for the rest of his life. However, the property can never be sold, mortgaged, or used as financial collateral by him or any spouse. Upon his death, it passes to his children, if any, or to a charity of Mrs. Eleanor's choosing." Jessica made a small strangled sound. The $1 million prize she'd been counting on had just vanished into thin air. Mark just stared at the floor, shame written all over his face. "Second," Mr. Miller continued, "Mrs. Eleanor has amended her will. Her financial assets will also be placed in this trust, managed by an independent executor." He looked pointedly at Jessica. "There will be no lump sum inheritance for anyone to use as collateral for personal loans. Third, and most immediately relevant," he said, picking up a final document. "This is a new residency and visitation agreement. From this day forward, Jessica is no longer permitted on this property without a direct, explicit, and revocable invitation from Mrs. Eleanor for each specific visit. She will no longer have a key. She will no longer have unrestricted access. Any violation of this agreement will be considered trespassing." I finally spoke, looking directly at my daughter-in-law. "That means you don't get to walk into my kitchen and give orders anymore, Jessica. You are a guest in this house now, and you will act like one." Then, I turned to my son. My voice softened, but the steel remained. "Mark, I love you more than life itself. But for 5 years, you stood by and watched your wife treat me with casual cruelty and profound disrespect. You chose peace over principle. Today you have to make a choice. You can be a man who stands up for his family, all of his family, and demands honesty and respect. Or you can continue to enable a woman who has been proven to be a liar and a thief. The kind of husband you are is up to you. But the kind of son I allow in my life is up to me." The tears finally started to stream down Mark's face. "Mom," he whispered, his voice thick with regret. "I am so sorry." I gave him a small sad nod. It was a start. Finally, I addressed the entire room. For years, I thought my job was to sacrifice my own happiness to keep this family together. I've learned something. A family held together by lies and fear isn't a family at all. It's a cage. Today, I'm walking out of that cage. I walked into my kitchen. It was a mess, with pizza boxes and paper plates stacked on the counter. But it was my mess. In my kitchen. In my house. "Now," I said, turning back to them with the first genuine smile I'd felt in years. "I'm going to make a real Thanksgiving dinner. For anyone who wants to stay and celebrate a holiday based on truth, and consequences, and maybe, just maybe, a new beginning." The rest of you know where the door is. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. I learned that my own peace was worth fighting for, even if it meant fighting my own family. If you've ever had to make a tough choice to reclaim your own respect and dignity, I would be honored to read your story in the comments below. You are not alone. And if my story resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for more.